Hello and welcome to When Sunday Comes, a podcast that aims to get into the heart of women's football and hosted by myself, Graham Falk. Today's guest is a full Ukrainian international and is currently playing in Denmark for HB Koge. Welcome to the show, Nicola Kozlova. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So panicked about getting the name incorrect of your club that you play for, but you kept me right. So I did all right, didn't I? Did all right.
Yeah, definitely did okay. It definitely took me a few months to learn how to pronounce it sort of properly.
A good start for me. I start every podcast with the same question because I feel like not enough people ask this, but how's your morning been, your early afternoon been so far, all right?
It's been quite a good day, yeah. Got some extra work in, got my eyebrows done, and just other than that, I've been hanging around. We have an off day today, so it's been kind of a chill day.
I was going to ask, is it an off day or a training day, but off day? Yeah, you kind of answered that. So I think obviously we're going to try and get through as much of your career as we can, but you can never get through everything. But we will start with the present. Obviously, it's been a really good start for yourself at a club level. I think at the time of speaking, you're clear at the top of the league. How much have you enjoyed the first few months of the campaign?
Yeah, definitely. It's always nice to be, I guess you could say, on a winning team. And it's definitely a different challenge. I don't think I've ever really got to experience being on a team that's always winning in my career so far. But it's a different challenge, and the level of the team is great and the environment is great. And we're always, you have to strive towards something. So it's always striving to be better and continuing to win all our games. So it's been definitely a good campaign. Unfortunately, our recent result wasn't great, but I think it was a little wake-up call for maybe some of us and just as a team in general to get back on the wagon and keep pushing to take every single game to our best ability.
I think if you take out the last game, which was the Brøndby game, though, it's been 100% record, so it couldn't have gone much better, really, could it?
Yeah, exactly. So it was one of those, I think in the back of the heads, everybody's like, when will it happen? Fortunately, it happened. You want that streak to keep going for as long as possible, but it's part of the game. And that's also why it's the best, I think, the best game in the world. Anybody can win on any day.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. No disagreement there whatsoever. Also, this season, obviously, you've had Champions League experience. I believe you came up against Juventus, which are not a bad side, shall we say. I imagine we've got a few players in the club I work for here in Scotland where it was their first Champions League experience this season against Roma, so are really similar in ways, both Serie A teams. But how was the experience for you? Obviously, Juventus are incredibly strong, but you performed very well.
Yeah, I think definitely when we got drawn against Juventus, we were all a bit not thrown back, but of course, looking at all the teams we could have played, Juventus was probably the biggest name out of all of them that we fingers crossed. But we took that game. We knew what we were going to face up against, and I think our first game really showed how good of a team we were and how we could battle with such, I guess you could say, a big club and a big league. And yeah, I think for us, it just showed how good we can be and how, as a team, when we play together and we stick to what we're good at, we compete against the top. In the first game, we could have won that game and things could have been different. Unfortunately, again, the second game didn't go exactly as planned. And
I think it's one of those things as well. Obviously, the result in many ways is disappointing because it didn't get you through the group stages. I get that. But when you come up against such a talented team, you're not going to play a team with that much talent week in, week out, and you've competed twice. That must give you loads of confidence going into the league season and for moving forward next season, with the hope that you do get in the Champions League again.
Yeah, exactly. You play the sport to play against the best. Same with my national team when we face up against those top countries. So it's what you strive for. It's that competition. And when you're the underdog, I love being the underdog. So of course, you wish the result lands in your hands, but sometimes it doesn't, and you still take away a lot of the positives from it.
And obviously, the move to Denmark came in January, I think, of this year. Denmark's a lovely country. I've only been there once, but I absolutely loved it. And I think it's really important, especially when you're coming from so far away from that kind of place. Like, I can't imagine doing the opposite way. But what have been your favourite parts of Denmark? Because it's quite a switch.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that a few of us internationals love, well, first of all, the team, I'm in a great team environment. There's a few of us that are from out of the country, so we kind of all live near each other and we do a lot of things off the field together. So that's always great. But I love, there's some Danish things that I love. For example, they have something called the marina, which is basically you go and do winter bathing. with a little sauna outside, and we do that almost every day. It must be the most Danish thing we do here, kind of on a daily basis, and I love that. And yeah, I love like the summers here are great, especially, and people are really nice. Big plus is that a lot of people speak English, which for us internationals makes life a lot easier than having to learn Danish, even though we've tried, but it's a very, very hard language. But yeah, that language barrier, I think, makes things a lot easier. You can go to the grocery store and you can get by everywhere here with English. So
I suppose it kind of helps, even though it's at a real distance. It's probably helped that you have like Molly, Bridget, those sort of players with you as well.
Yep, Molly's sitting right next to me. Yeah, definitely. We have a few. It's really nice to have all those internationals. Like we said, we do almost everything together off the field and constantly having dinners, playing board games, going to cafe. So it's just really nice to have people kind of similar, went through similar things, and yeah.
Yeah, perfect to share experience and stuff. And going back, sort of rewinding all the way back to when you're born in Toronto in Canada. Is that correct? Have I got that right?
Yep.
Thank God. What were your earliest memories of football? Because I think we all have it. Like I've got it as a fan, the first game I went to, but I suppose as a footballer, as a professional player, then your memories might stick out even more so because the first time you kick a ball ended up becoming your profession in a sense. So what were your earliest memories of football?
Honestly, I played a lot of different sports when I was young. I was just a kid that loved all sports. I think my dad signed me up for football, and I loved it from the first moment on. I just remember being a little girl that wasn't scared of anything, played with boys growing up, and yeah, it was just always a great time. And I think, but honestly, I didn't take it seriously until a bit later on, just because I was doing so many different sports. I did gymnastics for 10 years, did some track, did some other sports in there, and then only I think around like 10, 12, which is not too late, but that's when my like focus was like, oh, I love this sport. This is everything for me. And it's what I want to kind of focus on. And that's when all the other sports went bye-bye.
I find it quite interesting when I interview players that I speak to them about their early career, how they got into football. And a lot of the time it's like, I just enjoy this. I just want to play it. And it feels sometimes different to my experience as a fan because when I'm like 11, 12, I'm thinking about all the heroes I've got and all these players that have and having passion for my team and stuff. And sometimes players don't have that. They just have a real passion for the sport. But did you have any early heroes, people that you looked up to that you might have want to emulate it and still want to emulate in your career?
Honestly, I don't think so. Like obviously people always ask who your favorite player is. And back when, especially when I was little, it was always Messi. But I just really love the game. And people call me a football junkie because I love to watch any game, all the games, any day of the week. I'm trying to watch as many as I can. And I did that growing up, which I think a lot of my game too. But yeah, so when I was little, it was kind of the same. I loved watching EPL, World Cups, any big event. And I watched it a bit differently than fans, I think, would, just because I would see myself on that field and see what I could do in my positions.
As someone who lives in Scotland, I'm going to be completely blunt with you. The system in America and Canada, which I've seen some English and Scottish players go to, it's just completely different to what I'm used to. It's almost alien to me to the point where I'm obsessed with football, but I still don't know enough about it. So what is the journey from someone who enjoyed playing football through to that Canadian American college system? How does it work and how is it different to Europe?
Yeah, well, even Canada and US, I think, is a little different. But basically, there's just so many club opportunities at a young age. Just the amount of clubs you could play for is insane. Like in Toronto itself, like a U14 girls team, for example, there's like 200 teams you can pick from, I swear. And so you just play kind of at any club. There's obviously stronger clubs, weaker clubs, but there's no professional club. So nobody is going to an academy where they're signing a contract or they're there for many years. Nobody's really talking about professional football for quite a while because college is so normal first to go get a degree. And then if you want to play professionally, whoever that is, you do that after you get a college degree. Even though I think that's changing a little bit. Some of the big stars are going right to professional. But I think it's just way more, there's a lot more amateur football, I think. I think that's what it is. Like it's so much more normal to just play for a club team, wherever that is, whatever level. And of course there's different levels, but I think there is an issue with there's no next level. When I was in my teens, I played up with boys for a while. Then I was part of like this national team program, provincial teams, things like that. But then when that thing ended, I was playing for a women's team because there was no really competitive league for us talented 16, 17-year-olds to play anywhere else. So we were playing in a women's league. We had this, and it was more of us, our training environment is what helped us improve, but there was no elite, I think, leagues in Canada specifically. US is a bit better with that just because there's even more teams, more higher end leagues. They've created a lot of things, different leagues at a great level. But in Canada, that was a little missing. So when you get older and you really want to become serious, a lot of times you run into a brick wall because there's not that many choices.
Do you think that's why, obviously, it might change at next World Cup? Obviously, being English, I hope it does. But America have won many, many World Cups. Do you think that's potentially why? Because there's been, I mean, from watching movies about women playing football, soccer, that's been it's just been normal since I've been a kid, whereas it maybe wasn't in England and in Britain 10, 15 years ago, maybe even less. Do you think that's why there's so much success in America? Because they have got so many places you can go to. I suppose, I know you had a frustration, I suppose, but I suppose also the fact that there isn't a professional straight away at that age, and maybe gives you the hunger even more so to become professional, but still be able to play with your peers, if that makes sense, or am I reading that wrong?
Well, yes, I agree with that. I think that's why US has been so successful, just because they've had girls play girls football for so long, and there's been so many more opportunities. It's been taken more seriously, I think, in the US for a longer period of time. But right now we see Europe catching up quite drastically, which is great to see, just seeing it more around the world. But with professional, to be honest, I look at my Canadian teammates and teammates I grew up with, and not many of them became professional because either it just wasn't in their plans, or they went to college and then they realized they didn't want to take it so seriously, or they fell off even before college. So I'm not sure because personally, to be honest, I don't know that many of all I played with probably the most talented girls in my province, which was the biggest province, and not that many of them have become professionals.
Yeah, I can imagine there's definitely pros and there's 100% cons to it as well, I think, which you've explained really well there. I think one thing every footballer fears is injury. I've noticed that from doing so many interviews, and you got a bad injury really young, probably the injury that nobody wants. How tough was that period for you? I think you were 18.
Yeah. So I tore my ACL right before heading into college, which it was definitely a whirlwind of emotions. It happened for 2 weeks. I was told I was okay and nothing actually. They were saying, we don't suspect anything, but let's get an MRI to double check. And I got my MRI results. I had it sent to my college because I was going there in literally 2 weeks. I had a national team camp in 3 days. Got my results, fully torn ACL. You're going to need surgery. And I moved to campus in Virginia July 1st, and I got surgery July 3rd. And it was definitely a very tough transition. I think freshman year in college in the States, it's a huge time where you're meeting new people, you're connecting with your team and all things like that. Because I had surgery and was kind of excluded from the team just because when you're injured, you don't get to travel. You're not training, obviously. You're spending all your time in the training room doing rehab. It definitely kind of secluded me from the team a bit, and just getting to know peers around me. When I went to class, I just kind of kept to myself because I was going through something so major. But looking back, I wouldn't change it because I think in that year I grew so much as a person, on and off the field, just took in so many more different aspects of my game. And I think I became more of a whole football player during those years, during that year. But I also came back quite fast. I was only out for 7.5 months, which is really, really fast on the women's side. Thankfully, knock on wood, no problems with it since. So yeah, it was definitely a really tough time, but I think, like I said, there's positive things you can take out of it.
Yeah, definitely 100%. And I think it's interesting what you said there about, almost going inside yourself a little bit when the injury first happens, because I've spoken to people who've had a similar injury or a broken leg or something that's kept them out for a period of time. And sometimes you hear that and you think, oh, that must be tough as someone who's, physically used to running about and playing and yada, yada. It must be tough not playing the game. But most people who spoke to me have talked about the the feeling of being secluded because you can't help your team, you can't be on the pitch, you don't feel as part of it, you're not on the training pitch, you're in the rehab center, you're speaking to the physios. What does that do to a footballer mentally? Obviously, you've come through it and done really well with it, but what does that actually do?
Yeah, it definitely puts you in a really hot spot, especially, when you come. I had expectations of, playing, being a key role, and then you basically you kind of become a nobody. But I think you can change that situation to be kind of whatever you can and do whatever you can to leave an impact on your team. So for me, that became being a cheerleader and someone who loves watching the game and really analyzing the game. I became someone that teammates came to and asked about their performances because obviously I was never on the field. I was watching from above. So little things like that really helped me kind of still be in touch with the team. But again, nothing mimics playing with your teammates and training with your teammates and just going through that with them. But you do what you can, I think, in those situations. And I think you have to find the little things that are going to help you get through that. If that's a teammate, if that's maybe your family, maybe it's someone completely away from sports because you want to get away from it. So yeah, to each their own. Yeah.
I think it's what must be quite interesting. Something I find quite interesting is when a player comes back. That's like the kind of glorious moment. You're back on the pitch. You've overcome it. But I bet in the first few weeks there's kind of I don't want to say mental scars because it sounds a bit too drastic. But I bet there's the rustiness to begin with because you haven't played for so long. There's also the worry that could I do this again so quickly? Do I have to be careful? Do you go through that a little bit in the first few weeks?
Yeah, definitely. So like I said, I was cleared quite early and they were quite hesitant. My coach was really like, "Are you sure she's prepped?" But I had kind of the reason why we were pushing it so much is because I had my last U19 possible games in April, which would have been 9 months out of surgery. So I had to be ready for that. So I had to be cleared prior. So I was always in the back of my head through recovery. And yeah, my very first training, I get cleared and it's 1v1 defending. And I'm like, oh gosh, I have not hit anybody in 6.5 months. I'm about to be tackled. And the first tackle I get, I go flying because I just forgot how it even happened. But honestly, because that was my first training, once I got through it, the first few drills, I was the worst defender on the team. I was like, people, sorry. I don't know if I could put a leg in yet. But then as soon as I did, I think those little fears kind of went away. And then, of course, there's always, getting your touch back, getting your fitness back. Even to this day, like I don't rewatch injuries when I'm watching a game because if I see a knee go, it's always it can be in the back of my head for the next day or so. So yeah, of course, a little scarred, and I can't even you don't even want to think about it ever happening again or to anybody you even know. So yeah, it's definitely there, but you can't play scared because then there's no point of being out on that field. So you got to go. I think you got to get over it.
As someone who's experienced that injury, and we are seeing frequent injuries within women's football, and there's a lot of research going into it. How interesting do you find that research that's starting to come out about how women's bodies are different, and how educational is that for you as a professional?
Yeah, I think it's. I'm really glad it's coming out, and I hope we see positive changes from it because in this last year alone, we have seen so many big names go out with the exact injury. And I can only imagine how many names that we don't hear about from. So I do hope because like I said, to this day, I make sure I do all my prehab exercises, a few extra exercises for my knee. But like you said, some people can do everything right and it still happens. And there's no one type of person that it happens to. So yeah, I hope this research helps because it's an injury that I've seen unfortunately happen to too many girls. And for some, it ends their career.
Yeah, 100%. Agree with you on that. One thing that's quite interesting about your club career is the difference between, or potential difference between the leagues that you've played in. Obviously now playing in Denmark since January. How big is the shift from college football to the European game?
Yeah, I think I got exposed to the European game a bit earlier just because of my national team experience. Mm-hmm. But coming to Denmark, I think for me, and I think the big shift is always just the tactical, more technical side of the game. I think the US and the way I saw college sports is a very, very athletic game. But when you come to the most Europe leagues, I think just are a bit more technical and can be a bit more, I think the IQ is a bit different in the football game. I I just think in Europe, a lot of girls grew up watching the game a lot more than in the US. You know, a lot of my team at Virginia Tech played, like, they didn't really watch football. It was just me and like two other girls that would watch any football. It just wasn't, it's not really part of the culture. It's not so normal. But here in Denmark, for example, like when Denmark's playing, everybody's watching, or when Champions League is on, we all are eager to watch. So I think that changes kind of just how they see the game. They see a bit more maybe. So yeah, those are the biggest differences I've noticed.
I think obviously I've gone through your club stuff, but one big thing that we need to touch on is obviously international career. You qualified for Ukraine due to family. Obviously, you were brought up in Canada, in Toronto. You've played for the Ukrainian national team from the under-17s, I believe. But you also had a spell of time in Canada under-20s. I can't quite imagine how hard that would be to choose a nation, if I'm completely honest with you. I live in Scotland, but I'm English. If I was any good at football, which I'm not, I would be playing for England. When you have that decision to choose for two, how do you actually come to that point of choosing just the one?
Yeah, it was definitely not the easiest choice, but I think for me, it came down to where I wanted to be playing and who I wanted to be competing with. So obviously Ukraine is in Europe, and for me, I said I grew up watching European football, and it's where I want to excel my professional career. And so that was always in the back of my head. And like I know it's unfortunate that Ukraine, it's much harder for us to make major tournaments because we know we're competing against the top European countries. With Canada, it's a bit easier playing CONCACAF to get in, but also just ties to my family. Like I feel as Ukrainian as I feel Canadian. Both my parents are Ukrainian. We grew up, I speak it. I've gone to Ukraine. My family lives in Ukraine actually right now. So it's, for me, it wasn't like I was more one over the other. And I felt really close, high ties with Ukraine. And when I went over there and had that opportunity, it felt right. And it felt the place for me to be.
And obviously it's something that I really wish I didn't have to touch on. Like genuinely, I think no one wants to, but we will speak about it, I suppose. Obviously, you've played for the Ukrainian national team, the first team since 2019. Obviously, scored debut goal against Northern Ireland. You win the Turkish Women's Cup, I believe, and then 2 days later, Russia begin obviously their wrong invasion of your country. As someone from Ukraine who's close, maybe not living in Ukraine, you touch, you got family there. How were those days for you, if you can explain it?
Yeah, it was definitely crazy when it just happened. February 23rd was the last day of camp, was the day we all traveled away from camp, and some of us went to our European clubs, but a lot of girls play in Ukraine. And the 10 girls that flew to Ukraine, they never even made it home. They at like 6 a.m. when it all happened, they just took their cars and drove. So it was always, those first few days was just craziness of constantly checking to see if everybody's okay. And I've talked about this, but I had felt guilt those first few days of how unfair it was that I was going to Denmark, and I had girls or family and friends in Ukraine that had to, be there while it was all going on. And unfortunately, it's still going on to this day. When I say my family, it's my parents and my siblings who are in Ukraine even to this day. So it's definitely, it's not an ezy thing. But especially in the early days, I did what I could. I did a lot of volunteer work and did everything I could from afar.
Yeah, and I suppose you could never envision that being the situation when you moved to Denmark in January. And I don't even want to call it a blessing, but the fact that you are so close to maybe where you wouldn't have been in Canada, does that give you a little bit more hope being as close as you have been? Because obviously, I think if you go on your Twitter, you can see you're doing an awful lot of work and have been doing an awful lot of work since February to help with that. But I imagine living in Denmark gives you a little bit of, again, I don't want to say hope, but you're closer, essentially.
No, I definitely agree. I think I am closer, and it made it easier for my family to see me when they could. And this December winter break, I'm hoping to be able to go visit for at least some period of it and go back home. So yeah, definitely being in Denmark, it makes it easier that I'm closer. And there's a lot of actually Ukrainians here that are had to leave the country. So there's a lot of refugees here from Ukraine.
I think as well, it's probably not the most important thing, if we're honest. Obviously, I seen you play and the Ukrainian team play. Didn't feel like that long ago at Hampden Park in the 1-1 draw. And obviously, there's a lot of players looking to which clubs to play for. There's tons of them playing Ukraine, which you've sort of touched on. So that immediately stops football at club level because it's a war, an unjust one, but still a war. And then you can't play your international fixtures, but then you have to fulfill international fixtures, both the men and the women, because you've got teammates that are in Ukraine. Like, how difficult is that coming back into football when you're beginning to play? And also, how weird is it not knowing whether you can play or when you're going to play?
Yeah, I think definitely in the spring when we had to miss international games because of the war and just all the whole kind of unknown of things. When we got together in June, I think it wasn't weird. I think it was just, I think we were all really happy to be back together because, like I said, many of our girls play in Ukraine and they played on two major clubs. So a lot of them were teammates. And when the spring happened, they were all thrown around Europe in ones and pairs. So a lot of them, didn't see each other for all those months. And so just getting all back together and being able to represent our country, none of us are fighting in the war, but what we can do is fight on the field and, show how strong Ukraine can be in that sense. So when we got together in June, I think it was just a sense of pride and readiness to, show a battle. And it made it hard in the sense I don't think we performed at our best because of the whole situation of not missing a camp, not being together. A lot of girls, some girls were put in great training environments. Maybe they got put to a stronger club and they actually improved in these past few months. But some, maybe not as strong of a club or a league. So maybe their game didn't improve. And again, for some girls, they had family that maybe were very close to the front lines. And so football might have not been their number one thing on their list. And so, yeah, I think in that sense, it was just a very difficult time and situation. But when you were there, we really tried to focus on the football and just do what we could for our country.
I feel like I'm asking the most obvious question ever, but I kind of just want to hear it from your viewpoint. But playing for your country is always massive. Singing the national anthem, playing for your country, representing your country competitively, even in friendlies, is massive. But when you play for Ukraine, how much more of a significance does that now take on for you and the players?
Yeah, well, honestly, for me, I think the Ukrainian anthem is one of the best in the world. Just saying. If nobody's heard it, go and listen to it because you may not even understand half the words, but you will be pumped. So honestly, even when I played for my first game for the full team, I was in tears when the anthem was playing just because it just gets you very, very in this like fight mode. But yeah, with the war going on right now, I think it just means even more. And I remember the first game when we lined up in our 11, we were standing there. We were screaming that anthem and some girls were in tears. It was, I think, the first time, in a group, you're all there together singing this anthem, and it does mean more. And yeah.
I think the connection with the fans you can get as well. Obviously, I know not all of them can get at games because they played in different countries, essentially, neighbouring countries, but different countries. But obviously, I was at the Scotland-Ukraine men's game as well, where Ukraine won 3-1. And I was right next to the Ukrainian fans, a lot of them British-based, a lot of them who'd come over here for obvious reasons. And as someone who had no real stake in either team winning, because like I say, I'm English, I might live in Scotland, but I had no real stake. It was a really it takes you back to see. You can probably tell I can't quite get my words out with it, but to see that connection between people, and I think it was the last goal from, I wouldn't say Yarmolenko, but it wasn't. And he goes over to the fans and he just sort of walks over because it's 90th minute and just sort of embraces them. And it was really quite nice to see people who may have been separated in every other avenue being connected through football. And I know there's bigger things than football. I know I shouldn't say that in a football podcast, but there is. But it shows the connection that football can bring even in the most difficult situations, doesn't it? And Ukraine are really showing that at the moment across sport, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think it just brings people together in such hard times. And that win meant probably so much more for those fans. You get any win you can. And I think it just brings the country together. Like football has always done that. We've seen that. They always bring people together from different backgrounds, sometimes the same background, like Ukraine. I said, just bring all the Ukrainians together around the world. And yeah, I think that's the magic of football. And in times like this, you do need to turn to things like football because, yeah, like all fans love to watch it.
Yeah, and hopefully in the very, very soon future. You can play in Ukraine and play games in front of fans, and everyone's going to be safe, and the unjust war ends, of course. Two more questions for you before I let you go. One's a fun one. One's a really quite obvious one, probably. It cannot be lost on anyone listening to this that the Ukrainian managers obviously won the Champions League. That is some achievement. It's the elite of club football. How much have you learned from him playing under him? Because you can see what he's achieved.
Yeah, I have loved every second that I've been at camp with him. He's very, very professional, and his knowledge of the game is just tremendous. And he's very open to, like, when I have questions, he's very open to explain and have a discussion and talk about it. And I have loved, our training sessions, and it just has been a very professional environment. And honestly, I just wish we could have more. We've missed so many camps because of this war, and we've had less time with him and having that impact on our team. But I think every camp we've had, it's been a great football environment. And I think we've seen him and his staff, it's all staff he's brought as well. We saw also the help they've done helping the Ukraine with the war, and from Spain, collecting things for refugees and all, and donations. And so you can also see how good of a person he is and his staff. And so it's great to have, when maybe he's not Ukrainian, but he showed his support in this past 8 months. And so in that sense, it's been great. But yeah, on the football pitch and in camps, he definitely knows what he's doing. And you want to take in all the information you can. Like you said, every coach has a different viewpoint, but you want to listen to his viewpoint for sure. And I think I learned a lot from him, and I hope to learn even more.
Yeah, because he's done all right in his career so far. Not doing too bad. Okay. Yeah, not too bad. Final question. I always start with the same question. I always finish with the same question. And I think it's the most difficult one. The more I'm doing it, the more questions I'm asking, the more people I'm realizing find this question quite difficult. But from players that you've played with, what would be your ultimate five-a-side team? And you can or you cannot include yourself in this if you want. It's completely up to you.
Played with or again, just as teammates?
Played with teammates.
Oh gosh. Wow, this is hard.
Molly has to be included, right?
Plus I'm also early in my career. Okay. I would definitely pick Ukraine captain Daria Panachiko. Her soccer IQ is insane. So she would definitely be in my five-a-side. I would put myself in. You got to always bet on yourself. That's two. Oh gosh, it's hard.
I told you.
Do I need a goalkeeper, or is that already?
Me personally, I put a goalkeeper in. However, there's only one guest so far put a goalkeeper in. The rest have gone rush goalkeeper.
Okay, yeah. So I'll pass on that. Even though I've had some really great goalkeepers, but okay, wow, this is really hard. I would put my captain at my club here, Kira Caruso. She'll be in my five-a-side team. And I would put Emily Gray, my Virginia Tech teammate who plays for NC Courage right now. That's four. Okay, we're all really attacking players, so now I need a defensive focus. I would put wow, this is tough. I would put Emma Feo, who's also on my Danish team, who's a fullback and loves to get forward. So we would be a very attacking, creative, smart team.
Sounds like the right kind of plan to me. Nicole, really, really lovely chatting to you. Genuinely mean that. It's been really nice. I hope you've enjoyed it, because obviously I know there'll be media requests right, left and centre with women's footballers at the moment. So I hope most importantly you've enjoyed it, not me though. No,
thank you. I really enjoyed it. It was really nice.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'll let you get on with the rest of your day because you've got a day off, so I don't want to take it up with football chat. But thank you as always. And to the people listening, thanks for listening as well and making it this far, listening to me rattle on.